to the Strained Hammy podcast. Today is June 4th. My name is Mark.
I just strained my hammy, and I'm Rex.
And I'm Travis.
You okay?
You guys didn't see that one coming.
You okay, little buddy?
Hang in there.
Today we're going to talk about the Rangers, and we got some Cowboys thoughts as well. We're going to start off with the Rangers. We wanted to kind of give a little Jerks and Profar report. He's doing quite nicely in his fill-in spot for Ian Kinsler. With tonight's game not included, he's played 10 games, 40 plate appearances, 12 hits, 2 home runs, 6 RBI, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. He's hitting .324, .350 for his on-base percentage, and .514 for his slugging. He's holding his own, definitely. I think the question now, though, is starting to become, what do you do when Kinsler's back and healthy? That was a more difficult question a couple hours ago, and then we heard that MLB is likely going to suspend Nelson Cruz for up to 50 to 100 games, possibly. And then that's not likely to happen for a couple weeks. So personally, I think the plan would be maybe to, when Kinsler comes up, I think they should send Profar back down to AAA, let him get some work in right field, maybe 2 out of 3 games, and then he can go play second base the third game. Just get him some work, because he's never played outfield before.
Yeah.
So I think he needs to get some work in AAA. And then by the time Nelson Cruz's appeal fails and he is suspended, he'll at least have a working knowledge of how to field the fly balls for the first time since Little League. What do you guys think?
What I would do and what is more likely to happen are two separate things. I think because of the new light on the Nelson Cruz thing and the light of he's not that great of a defensive right fielder.
That's not new.
I would like to see them do something with him, maybe put him in a DH/fourth outfielder role, and then kind of work with Kinsler as being the rotational guy. I think you threw out some of Profar's offensive stats over the last 10 games, but some of the things that don't show up on the stat sheet are what you see when you watch him is he is incredibly better at defense than Kinsler.
Mm-hmm.
He do defense, and Kinsler does not. So at least not consistently, and I think Kinsler would be better a defender than Cruz even. So you kind of filter out the worst of the defenders, which being Cruz, and then you try to make it work. Yeah. So that's what I think I would like to see happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're right. Profar probably goes back to the minors and they say, we got to find a way to get him back up here. Let's put him in the outfield and see if we can get him where he can play the outfield and then get him back up for some big league time. I don't like it because he's such a good infielder, but I think that's probably the most likely way they go.
Yeah, and I actually had not considered that as a possibility. I thought they kind of made the decision this year by leaving Profar down. I felt like you said, that if you're going to move somebody to the outfield, you want it to be Kinsler and not Profar, just for the upside of Profar defensively in the infield. But I could certainly see it, especially in kind of the emergency situation that they may be put in, because who else is it going to be?
Yeah.
And so, Profar's got a solid bat. He may even long-term have the pop in his bat to be a corner outfielder, especially if he starts to walk at the major league level like he did in the minors. So I could see it. I think you would definitely see a significant drop-off offensively out of that spot this year if Profar ends up being your guy during that 50-game suspension. So I don't really like it for this year, but I guess if you lose a guy for 50 games, you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
Out of your plan for the season.
Yeah. It's not something that we would do unless this thing with Cruz happened.
I could see Profar being a pretty good outfielder, though.
Well, the thing that I've been thinking about, even before Cruz, just trying to think how we could keep all three of them together. And if we're talking about in terms of positional value, keep Kinsler at second, try a Profar out at center field, And, I mean, his bat plays well in center field. You don't lose much value there. I mean, you don't get much power out of center fielders normally.
Yeah, but Leonis probably doesn't have the power to be a corner outfielder, right?
You can put him in, I don't know, left field. He's got a projectable bat, and that's the thing that everybody talks about him is he's got power. He can hit gap to gap. He might not get you all the home runs, but I think if you want to keep all three of those there and keep them happy and keep... I don't think Kinsler's going to play as well. His bat's not going to play as well in the outfield. That's just something I've been thinking about recently, especially in light of this.
And Profar shouldn't be married to second because, one, he's a shortstop, and two, he was a pitcher 2 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know about the... I mean, the outfield situation is a quagmire because your best two center fielders defensively don't have the bats that necessarily match up with it. Leonis Martin and Greg Gentry... They're kind of opposites. Gentry doesn't have power, but he's a good average guy, and he's got great speed on the base pass. Martin is better suited projects better to a corner outfielder spot, but he's also very rangy and fast, and he's probably more of a gap hitter at this point in his career, which would suggest a center fielder.
Yeah.
So they're kind of, where do you play those guys as far as your stereotypical bats with defensive? Well, they're all three of them would project to be really good center fielders, defensive center fielders. And if you threw all those guys at left field, center, and right field, well, to me it means like there shouldn't be one ball hit the ground in the outfield. I mean, those guys should be really good at covering the field. But do you sacrifice pop in the offense by doing that? And I think at this point the answer has to be yes.
I think that's why Gentry's the odd man out in that situation because he doesn't have it at all. Whereas Martin and Profar, if he got moved out there, both have, like you said, projectable bats that can produce a little power.
And I agree. I think Gentry then moves to a fourth or fifth outfielder with Murphy, and then
the new
Cruz
Murphy.
is your right fielder, and
Murphy's
Kinsler stays at second. So I would like to see Kinsler make the move because I think he has a more potential left in his career than Cruz. They're about the same age. I think Cruz might actually be a year older.
Cruz is older than people think he is.
Yeah. And
he's
so
a late bloomer.
I'd like to see Kinsler make that move, and hopefully I think he'd be a better defensive fielder than Cruz, and I think at the plate that's about the same guy.
I think I would sacrifice what nominal improvement you would get in that during that 50-game suspension by bringing Profar up in that spot and going next year with the solid idea of Kinsler, you're going outfield. I know you like him at second because his offensive numbers are better at second. But I think having Elvis and Profar up the middle of your infield is something special and something that you shouldn't sign away just because it makes things better right now.
Yeah, I mean, if Mitch Moreland would stop being so dang, serviceable, we could just move Kinsler in first, and then we get Profar at second, and we'd all be happy.
Well, and I know we've been mentioning several times about statistics by position. Mm-hmm. If they're all in your lineup,
we've had this talk before. I think one of our first podcasts we talked about that.
So
it doesn't matter.
If Kinsler's playing at right field or second base, offensively you would assume his numbers are still the same.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't matter. And the same with Profar. If he's playing second or outfield, shouldn't matter. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't matter where they're playing, but they're both going to be in the lineup, then you should want the best defensive solution. That's the tiebreaker.
And that would be Kinsler in the outfield and
Correct.
Profar in the infield.
I don't think it's going to happen this year, like you just said. 50-game suspension, probably Profar would be the outfield.
And our 50-game suspension late bloomer, Nelson Cruz.
Late bloomer.
We did want to bring up another late bloomer who we kind of messed around and traded, maybe just a little bit too early. And the Orioles, Chris Davis.
He was out of options, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. Other than was it Adrian Gonzalez, the guy that we traded to the Padres?
Yeah.
Other than Gonzalez, the real blemish on the John Daniels ledger right now would be Chris Davis. for Koji. Although Koji helped you.
Don't forget about Tommy Hunter, too. We sent away Tommy Hunter, too, in that trade. And he's turned into a fireballing setup guy.
Hey.
So, yeah, that was... I'm not defending the trade, okay? I'm just saying this straight away. I'm not defending it. It was a bad trade. I'm on record saying it's a bad trade.
Yeah.
It is not, however, the worst trade ever, as I've seen 2 different national outlets say it to be. The worst trade ever, if you want to talk about the worst trade ever, how about the one John Daniels was on the other end of, the Mark Teixeira trade, where we got the haul for that. So I just wanted to get that out there. I'm not defending it. Bad trade. Davis was out of options.
But
we had seen him.
Their hand was forced then.
Yeah.
It was the out of options, and at that time he suffered from significant Josh Hamiltonism, that he swung at everything that was down and away and he missed. Or if he connected on one that hung, it was a home run.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, we couldn't. He needed to develop more.
Yeah, and Mitch Moreland had already claimed the job
Correct.
in 2010
and
in the World Series.
We needed to get something for him, because if you send him to the minors, then people will just claim him. So you might as well get something for him. Granted, he finally figured it out, and it looks bad now.
And he was at the point
you can't decline the logic.
Yeah.
No.
He was at the point kind of like Nelson Cruz was when we sent him back down for the last time, where it wasn't he needed to develop more. It was, this is what this dude is. Now, he defied that. He did the work or did the steroids or whatever to change. And I'm not...
Whoa.
I'm not trying to make that claim about Chris Davis, but I am...
Allegedly.
But you did.
I am making that claim clearly about Nelson Cruz. Which is the other situation that we've seen something similar in. I think that the where Cruz, maybe found the right medicine. Davis's medicine was more in the fact that he learned how to take a walk from time to time, and for a power hitter, if you can be a little bit more selective, it changes everything for you at the plate, because you start to see good pitches. And when Chris Davis saw good pitches, even as a Ranger, he hit them out of the park. He just had such a hole in his swing that nobody ever threw anything near where he could hit it, and it didn't matter because, like you said, like Josh Hamilton, since he's been mired in the slump, he just swung at everything, and he was in big trouble. But I will defend the trade a little bit. Chris Davis looked like garbage.
Oh yeah, and that's why I think it's sort of getting a pass in the local media here. I don't think people are going to be, obviously they're going to bring it up when they talk about bad John Daniels trades, but it's not going to be 1A. 1A is well over.
And we needed Koji at the time. Koji was
the best reliever in baseball at that time, and I mean,
was there also a prospect included in that?
I don't think so. I think it was Koji and $2 million from the Pirates.
That's right. It was the money.
Yeah,
that's right.
And the other thing is, with any trade where it's prospects for right now players, you measure it in its success.
Yeah.
And so the Rangers had immediate success, so it's a win.
Yeah. The other thing people bring up is that they didn't have Koji on the World Series roster.
Yeah.
Because he did so poorly in the 2 previous playoff series. So that didn't look good. But then he was a productive guy in 2012, so I don't see that part as a total failure. It's never a good idea to trade a position player for a reliever. Yeah. Relievers aren't something you want to be trading guys for. But like we said, out of options. We've seen him. We know what he is for us. Like John Daniels said when he made the trade, he said, if he turned out to be a late bloomer, we'll just live with it. And they had. They went to the World Series. They had a good team in 2012. It didn't work out because somebody S the bed.
Well, and to that point, I don't think you can necessarily say that you're worse off. You know, Mitch Moreland has turned into a pretty solid player this year. Defensively, he's always been on the same level or similar level as Chris Davis, because Chris Davis was a good defensive first baseman, and Mitch Moreland's always been a good defensive first baseman. It was their bats, and both of them, it was who's going to figure it out first. Well, Moreland always had the better average.
He's also always hurt too.
Yeah.
And then Chris Davis figured out the plate discipline this year, and he's looked ridiculous. So
and
it's
I've
kind of
actually,
like, you're in a good situation, but you might have been better off. So it's,
well, the other thing is, I've heard Chris Davis say himself in an interview that he was a change of scenery guy, that he needed to be in a different place to hear different voices. It just wasn't working here.
No.
The guy looked great for a game at a time and then looked terrible. And so I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, I'd almost be willing to say I am sure that you don't see 20 home runs at this point in the season out of Chris Davis in a Ranger uniform. Now, he may have eventually gotten better and clicked a little bit for him, but I think that move to Baltimore and the change of scenery and the change of coaches, not saying their coaching is better, but just hearing it from somebody different really did him a lot of good.
I agree with that.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and some of their positional battles coming up. All right, back with you on the Strained Hammy podcast. Jerry Jones promised a uncomfortable offseason at Valley Ranch, and some people lost their jobs, some coaches lost their jobs. Do you guys think there are any players in danger of losing their job? What's the most important positional battles for you guys coming up?
Well, I think when we were going into our draft coverage and preview talks, we all thought offensive line was a huge need. They addressed it with one guy, and he steps in as a starter at center. So how does that impact the rest of the line? I think it opens the door for two significant battles, right tackle and right guard. So really the right side of the line is pretty much in shambles right now. But we'll talk about tackle first, because I think that was going to be a battle regardless of what they did. If they brought in somebody, he was still going to battle it out with Free and Parnell, because they were on a rotation last year. So, but as it is, it's just Free and Parnell, and with Free's restructured contract, I think he has the leg up, unfortunately. But I want Parnell to win, because I think he's the more athletic of the tackles, and I think he is more suited for a tackle position with his skill set. I think he's very raw in his development right now, and that's what's holding him back. But Freeze, he's terrible. So
yeah, and I disagree with you, but maybe I'm just thinking what I want to think. But to me, Doug Free's contract is the ultimate insurance policy. It's low money this year and no money next year. So I think they got him to restructure by saying, do it or we'll cut you. And so he did. With the hopes that he would be able to get that second year money. I think Parnell should have the leg up on the job. He's a younger guy. He's more athletic. He played a game of left tackle at a solid level last year, and he never looked exceptionally bad at right tackle last year. He also never looked exceptionally good. So it may be more a case of Doug Free being a bad player than Jeremy Parnell really forcing his way into a job. But I think he's good enough, and I think that unless Doug Free finds some form, Jeremy Parnell will take his job, because Doug Free is a more talented football player when he's right. He just hasn't been right in 2 years.
Well, here's another thing to consider: at $3 million a year, Doug Free as a swing tackle, if he can get his mind right, backup is not bad. It's not a bad thing to have.
Yeah.
To have a guy that if he can get his mind right, a guy that you can have that could step in at left or right tackle in any situation and give you a game. I would be completely okay with that and say, then you can have a guy on your practice squad that's a tackle, but it saves you some roster space on game day. And I'm completely cool with that. And I kind of hope that's the way it goes. So I think we're on board with that. We both want Parnell to win.
Doug Free was the worst starting offensive lineman in football last year, but he'd be somewhere in the middle of the pack as far as backup offensive tackles go.
But do you agree if maybe the renegotiated contract and it takes some pressure off of him, that maybe he gets his mind straight, then he has some value?
Yeah, and I think if he gets his mind and body straight, and he's young enough that he shouldn't have just fallen off a cliff like he has.
Right.
So there's a chance that with Doug Free, as much as I hate to admit it, as much as I've bagged on him for the entire last year and a half, if he's the player he was 2 years ago, body and mind, that's a bargain as your starting right tackle.
Yeah.
He just for the last 2 years has not been able to play football at a level constituting a starting job in the NFL.
Well, there's still a chance that he gets a job as a turnstile operator, so yes. We can hold out hope for that. So let's move on to the guard position, and I think this actually gets a little bit more interesting. Not necessarily just between the competition between Free and Parnell, but because there's 3 guys that are legitimately contending for a spot right now, and 2 of the guys you could kind of say we don't really know what their chances are, or what they even have to bring to the table, other than what we've heard from OTAs. And scouts are pretty high on Ron Leary. They say he's a strong guy. He tosses guys like they're nothing, and makes it look like he's been a middle stuffer or a run blocker forever.
Yeah, and he was a talented guy coming out of college. The reason he was off of draft boards is he has no cartilage in one of his knees, and so
who needs it?
He's a guy that
overrated.
He was a guy that was going to be a bad investment on draft day, which is why he was available undrafted. He was out of shape last year. He came in weak and slow, and some people questioned why they gave him, because they gave him huge money for an undrafted free agent guard. I think $650,000 guaranteed or something like that.
Yes. Around there. I don't know the exact number, but yeah.
And that's just unheard of for a rookie free agent undrafted guard. You don't get any guaranteed money. You get an invitation to wear a practice jersey. But he's gotten back in shape. His knees look good. He looks strong. He looks quick. And Mackenzie Bernardo looked...
None of those things last year.
Yeah, looked like the second worst starting offensive lineman in football, possibly.
So there's still an outside shot that Bernardo... I mean, he wasn't a terrible player.
Yeah, he just forgot to get out of his stance.
He just... when he was with the Panthers, he gave them quality starts.
Yeah.
He wasn't an all-pro guard, but we also didn't pay him like an all-pro guard. We paid him to be a solid guard, and I don't think he was that. So if he could return to being a solid guard, he'd at least be respectable if he won the job.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with what potential you have with Costa and Leary, you hope that those guys can beat him for that job because of their potential.
Well, and
we saw it from Costa at center last year, and we hope that translates to guard.
Yeah.
Or if not, that Leary...
Yeah, and that's the thing we didn't even mention was Phil Costa. I think what Phil Costa does is he guarantees you that at center and one guard spot, you're going to have a solid player. Because Travis Frederick's going to have to be good to beat out Costa. Now he's going to. He's a first-round pick. The only way he doesn't start at center is if he starts at guard. Because he also has that versatility. But he's your starting center.
I think he's the more likely center candidate, which would force Costa to the guard.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is if Costa's now a guard, Bernardo's got to be better than he was last year to win that job. Now, he may still have a leg up because he's not quite as injury-prone as Costa has shown to be over his career. But Phil Costa's a more than serviceable NFL interior offensive lineman. And so Mackenzie Bernardo would have to play at a level higher than he played last year to win that job day one, regardless of what Ronald Leary does, which is an unknown. So I think that's only a good thing. That competition is one of the places that you could really improve your football team this year.
And I like that. I think we're very interested in this group to see what happens along the offensive line, because I think that dictates more how the Cowboys will do this season than any of the other position battles. But sticking along the offensive line, and you guys will think, how can you have a future Hall of Famer and have a position battle there? But alas, Jason Witten will be in the Hall, and James Hanna and Gavin Escobar are battling for the second tight end spot. And I think that is significant, especially because of the way NFL is going with 2 tight end looks. The Patriots have made that, the way to go. The Cowboys have been trying for years to get it to work and have been unsuccessful. But as long as Garrett's been the offensive play caller, and I think the year before he came, they've been trying to do that, is get a second tight end that can complement Witten and be a dual threat from those guys where you create mismatches. I think Hanna and Escobar both have the potential to do that, and I think it's for different reasons. We talked about it a little bit in the draft coverage, but basically Hanna is a wide receiver in a tight end's body. He runs a 4.4, which is ridiculous for a tight end. It's maybe a 4.48, so a little higher, but
he's flat fast for a tight end.
Correct. And he's 6'4", 240. So he's not as big as Escobar or Witten, but he's faster and quicker. Escobar is just a massive tight end. He's a little bit bigger than Witten. Anybody who scouts him will tell you he's got incredible hands. So he's on par there with Witten. So that would be, if you line him and Witten up, you have essentially the same guy on the other side. Who are you going to cover? How are you going to cover him? And you can't. And a lot of people will actually tell you that Escobar is a little bit more athletic than Witten, which makes him a more ideal red zone target. So
and a little bit bigger too. He's 6'6" to
a little
6'5".
Yeah, a little bit bigger, but basically it just opens it up for very interesting to see. One, is one of those guys going to emerge as the number 2 tight end, or 2, how are they going to split those passes? Because I think both of them can be used equally well if used properly in different situations in the field. I could see both of them having 20 to 30 receptions apiece and getting like split passes out of that spot.
And Hanna being in more like short yardage waggle situations, Hanna being in more seam routes and things like that, and Escobar being in more short yardage.
Yeah. You get inside the 20,
situations.
Escobar comes in. Everything outside of that, Hanna might be your...
And that's all set up by kind of strange decision-making that has led to that competition, in the fact that James Hanna won a job from John Phillips last year through his play in practice.
Yep.
And then they went out and spent a second-round pick on a guy that's in his spot. So that's definitely a place where the Cowboys have intentionally created competition.
And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it'll be interesting, especially, like I said, with the NFL going to 2 tight end looks from some of the better teams.
And the Cowboys saying they want to play that 12 personnel as their base package.
Let's see it, and I think it'll be. I think they could use both of them.
Yeah.
They could split and be equally effective. So, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about safety. And this one I think is the most interesting because they legitimately have, I want to say 5 guys competing for 2 spots. Barry Church and Matt Johnson, for some reason, are the incumbent starters. Church, obviously, he was the starter at the beginning of last season before his Achilles injury. Johnson, I don't know why he would be penciled in as a starter because he's never played a down in the NFL. Other than everybody loves his potential, they love his leadership. He's very athletic. He's still the fastest of all the safeties on the team. He's rangy, and he's got good ball hawking skills. So I like his potential. But then you also have Will Allen, who is a savvy veteran safety who will be solid. Mm-hmm. You have...
Who's proven he can play in the NFL, unlike Matt Johnson.
9 seasons, and he's contributed a ton. Yeah. J.J. Wilcox, who they drafted in the 4th round, very athletic. A lot of potential there too, but raw. He only played 1 year as a safety, and the rest of the time he was actually a linebacker. He was the offensive guy.
He was a running back, yeah.
Running back, yeah. And Jakar Hamilton, who was undrafted, but again, extremely athletic safety, almost as fast as Matt Johnson. So another rangy guy, and he showed that in college. He was a ball hawker. So 5 guys competing for 2 spots. I think if Barry Church comes back healthy, I think you could pencil him as a strong safety, depending on who the other person is to win the other spot.
Yeah.
If it's Matt Johnson, Jakar Hamilton, or J.J. Wilcox, those guys are probably going to be your free safety because they're the better cover, more athletic guys. If it's Will Allen, you probably make Church the free and Will Allen the strong, but we'll see.
Yeah, on Jakar Hamilton, I think in the NFL coaches' hierarchy of needs, if you're an undrafted free agent, you have a long, long road to a starting spot your rookie season. So I think it's much more likely he makes a team as a special teamer if he makes a team. So I think the more legitimate competition would be between Matt Johnson and J.J. Wilcox. And Wilcox, to me, has a really long road to a starting spot as well. I have, however, heard in OTAs that dude just makes plays. And so if you continue to do that throughout OTAs, throughout training camp, throughout the mini camps, and throughout the preseason games, you can Barry Church your way into a starting spot, which is exactly what he did last year before he got that Achilles injury. Now, Barry Church did have a year under his belt before he did that. And so maybe Wilcox's road is a little too long and Matt Johnson is more likely.
Well, the only thing that gives him a leg up is that it's such an unclear position at who's going to step in because Matt Johnson really didn't play last year. Yeah, so that helps J.J. Wilcox maybe have a better shot, and Jakar Hamilton as well.
Yeah.
So just because it's so unclear and Johnson didn't play last year, those other guys have a legitimate shot of saying, let's step in and be starters.
Yeah, the only reason I would disagree at all, I feel like if Jakar Hamilton was going to win that spot, they'd give it to Will Allen.
Let Hamilton have a year.
Yeah,
that's possible.
If Johnson or Wilcox won the job, I think they would. I think they would definitely give it to Johnson. They would consider giving it to Wilcox. I think if Hamilton was the best player there, Will Allen's your week one starter. Just because I need a guy that proves it on Sundays a couple of times before I start handing away starting defensive line spots. Where Matt Johnson is a special case because they obviously believe in that guy's talent or they wouldn't have kept him around all last year. So.
Okay, well, that one, like I said, there's 5 guys for 2 spots, I think will be crazy to watch because of who's going to win in that spot.
Maybe not the most important, but certainly the most intriguing position.
Let's go ahead and move down to the nickel / dime corners, B.W. Webb and Orlando Scandrick. Orlando Scandrick is the returning nickel corner. Mm-hmm. B.W. Webb was the other 4th round pick. He was a 4th round pick. Mm-hmm. I think I said Wilcox was 4th, but he was a 3rd.
3rd round, second, 3rd round.
So Webb was the 4th round pick that is extremely athletic, and he's automatically your dime corner and will compete for the nickel corner. Personally, I think B.W. Webb really has a very, very good shot at winning the nickel spot because of, and we've talked about it, Scandrick has a high contract for a nickel corner, and Webb is far more athletic. They're about the same size, height-wise. Webb's a little bit lighter in weight, but he's faster, he has a better vertical, he's more of a ball seeker than Scandrick. Mm-hmm. Scouting reports say that their coverage skills are similar. Orlando Scandrick, by all accounts, is a very good nickel corner. B.W. Webb has very good coverage skills.
And B.W. Webb, by reputation at least, is a better player as far as taking the ball away.
Absolutely.
And is maybe a little more suited for this particular scheme, as he's played a lot of zone in college. So I think B.W. Webb has a better chance than maybe he should have in this situation. And I think the Cowboys would be absolutely tickled pink if he took that job. And
I agree. The only stipulation I have is that if you had Scandrick and Webb as your nickel and dime, your 3rd and 4th corners, and assume everybody stays healthy this year, Carr and Claiborne, regardless of who's 3 and who's 4, for this year alone, you'd be tickled.
You have a heck of a second.
Next year, you really want B.W. Webb to be that guy this year, or show that he can be that guy, because then it makes sense to let Skandrick and his contract go.
Yeah, the only reason it would help you this year to have Webb on the field more than Skandrick is that, like I said, Webb potentially takes the ball away more, and that is a trait missing off this defense, and a trait that's important for this defensive scheme. Is you want as many guys who take the football away as possible in this Tampa 2 scheme.
Can we agree that the guys that they've brought in to compete for these spots are more athletic ball hawking types? The safeties we talked about,
absolutely,
and the corners, B.W. Webb competing for a significant role. These are types of guys that hopefully and intentionally should increase that turnover number.
Yeah, and hopefully that is a byproduct. You have the obvious battle, Justin Durant and Alex Albright, and throw Ernie Sims in there if you want for the strong side linebacker position. I feel like they signed Justin Durant to be the guy, but I also feel like Alex Albright played a lot better than I thought he was capable of at the end of last season. And so, to me, Albright should go into the mini camps as your quote unquote starter, and Durant should have to win the job. I think it's probably the other way around in the Cowboys' mind.
And I agree. I think, like you said, they brought in Durant to be that guy. He was a starter last year and had a pretty good season, so I don't think they're counting Alex Albright out, but I think just from where Durant's coming from, they're like, hey, you got it right now. But it is going to be an open competition between all 3 of those guys, and I think they all have a legitimate shot, and it's going to come down, like you said, to right now OTAs and spring training.
And the great part about this defense is you want a job on this defense and one that's open, create turnovers, and these coaches will love you.
Yep.
And so Albright has a legitimate chance in that spot, despite the fact that they signed a free agent.
Yep.
The last spot available on this team is not a direct competition, right tackle versus right tackle. It is the fullback spot versus the 4th tight end spot. You're either going to keep 4 tight ends or you're going to keep Lawrence Vickers. And with the 12 personnel coming in, I think Lawrence Vickers has got a heck of a fight to keep a roster spot.
Well, and that was you're referring to the recent signing of Rosario. Dante Rosario, the tight end, formerly of the Panthers / 4 other teams in 4 years.
Chargers. Yeah.
So he is a pass-catching tight end, athletic, fluid routes, big guy, but not known as a blocker. So
has some experience at H-back, though.
Yes. So you're talking about a guy that they brought in who's a veteran player to be a 4th tight end, and Vickers is the guy that would be gone. So, you brought this up, and it was not a position-to-position battle, but the guy that loses that battle doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
So it's very significant, and I was interested when they brought Rosario in because I thought that didn't make any sense at all. They don't need it. They have 3 tight ends that are all going to be, I think, legitimate contributors. DeMarco Murray runs better with a fullback, so it makes sense to keep Vickers around. But when you they brought in Rosario. I mean, whether I like it or not, they did it. And that's the guy that will get knocked out, is Vickers. And it'll be interesting to see how they use it if they don't have a fullback. They've done it before with John Phillips' first year. They didn't have a fullback, but they just used tight end in a rotational role. But they don't have a guy that's like John Phillips, who is actually a solid blocker.
Yeah, the good thing, though, is the reason I put four tight end and not Rosario specifically is because if you put him at H-back and he doesn't look as good as he did with San Diego, he looks like a poor blocking tight end, and not just at the point of attack on the line of scrimmage, but also coming out of the backfield, because those are 2 different things. If he doesn't look good at that, you can always find another H-backy tight end to try him out, and you can do that 4 times before you get to the end of training camp.
Yeah.
And I think that they want to make a legitimate commitment to this 12 personnel. I think they're going to say DeMarco figure out how to run without a fullback. So I think that H-back thing is only going to be a short yardage situation deal anyway. And Lawrence Vickers makes too much money as a fullback to play 12 plays a game, which if they go to that 12 personnel would be about the most he's going to play in a game. So I think he's got a tough road to go down to win a job on this team.
And I agree with bringing in a fourth tight end. They clearly shouts that's what they want to do.
Yeah, and you're not only going against a player at that point, you're going against a player and a scheme. Yep. Vickers has got to be good enough
prove his worth
to make Jason Garrett say maybe 12 personnel is overrated.
So we've got till August 4th. The Hall of Fame game against the Dolphins is the 5th preseason game for the Cowboys added to the schedule to work all these battles out, and we will keep track of them as we go along.
All right, thank you for joining us on the Strained Hammy podcast. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Strained Hammy and go to the site www.strainedhammy.com. Thanks for listening.